Right. I think we're recording. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on a Friday night. I think you realize that you are a geek, and you realize that you are getting older when you're not out partying on a Friday night, but you're actually sitting at home talking about Excel. But I must say I prefer that these days. So yeah, thank you for joining me on a Friday evening, Steyn and Jason. Um, and yeah, thank you for the hard work so far. We've just had the first round of the South African Excel Championships this week on Tuesday, and we had a case by Steyn. The case was called Conversion Time, and essentially it's a case that encapsulated all the money and sort of measures and the conversion around that. And it was actually a lot more tricky than I initially thought it would be. I must say, I also struggled with it myself, especially from level 4 onwards. And I think it was a tough case. And usually, how we want to do these things is we actually want to build the cases up so that you start with something a bit simpler, and you make it more difficult as the rounds go along. But I think we actually ended up with a starting case that was actually one of the most difficult cases that we've put out. What I like about this, the fact that when I saw the results, I could see that there was actually a lot of progression from last year. So last year, when a lot of people were not accustomed to the format and the sort of game style Excel competitive modeling style questions, a lot of them struggled. They were not a lot of high marks in the first round last year either, but the case was a lot simpler. So it shows a lot of progression in the South African competitive space. And we've actually doubled in numbers of signups as well. So we've got a lot more people competing. The competition is getting tougher and tougher. We're seeing a lot of new names as well, especially in the top 10. I think at least half of the top 10 are new people. So very, very excited to see that. Seeing some ladies come through as well. So that's also very welcoming to see that there's a mix of players in the mix as well. So excellent. But let me not do all the talking. Jason, maybe you could just maybe, I don't know, share a bit about yourself. Just maybe introduce yourself again, or just maybe give us some of your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Renier. Yeah, look, it's always good to be back on the case design team. A bit of a change up from the regular season that we participate in on the sort of global financial modeling World Cup and Excel esports sort of level. So it's good to be back on the case design side, but yeah, you forget how much work it is that goes into setting up these cases, and it's quite refreshing to get feedback afterwards and think about what you didn't think about when you were sort of testing it internally and stuff. So no, looking forward to unpacking the case, and yeah, I think it was a great case, Steyn, and I think hopefully a lot of learnings for people. So notwithstanding the fact that I think some people got more tripped up with the conversions than we thought they might. Um, I think some solid learnings just from Excel, approach to problem solving, I think can come out of this case, especially when you get to the later levels. I think we'll demonstrate some techniques which will hopefully be quite helpful for people.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I think you've touched on something important, and that is proper preparation, and especially in this case, proper preparation under time pressure and under pressure in general. And I think some of the key principles in this case was data management, proper data preparation, and we saw with Diarmuid Early, who actually helped us test the case as well, and also shared his live version. I'll link the live version from Diarmuid's side as well. I think it's one of the first cases where I've seen Diarmuid actually spend almost the full time and not get full marks, which might be a feather in your cap, Steyn. But I also said I haven't seen them sit with 5 minutes in, still scratching his head. So I think that conversion table, even though it was very simple, it really knocked a few guys' socks off. And you also said, Steyn, that it makes you appreciate the metric system a lot more, right? The fact that everything is either 10 or 100 or 1,000 into one another makes it a lot simpler. But yeah, maybe Steyn, you can share your thoughts around what your inspiration was for the case and how that went.
Well, it was a few months ago when my father gave me a problem from decades ago. It was something along the line of, say you have 20 workers and they're earning, say, 6 shillings an hour, and then what would your total cost increase be if they got a 20 pence or a raise? And then you had to calculate that without the calculator. Then I realized these multiplying by all of these funny ratios, it makes it difficult, especially when you can't use a calculator.
Yeah, and if you have to determine like you have to determine how much would you pay for 1,000 whey, or I can't even remember that final bonus question, but a 1,000 whey in pounds taken to, yes, it was so confusing, because the big thing there is, when do you divide and when do you multiply? As at school, I used to remember that you multiply by what you want, divided by what you have, things like that. But when you're under time pressure and you're working with big amounts, you don't know whether you've multiplied or divided. And the same happened to Dim in his live video as well. So it just showed you that maths was, like we said, maths was the ultimate winner there. And one of my friends, Alec, he always says that it's all about maths. So computer science, competitive modeling, Excel, everything is based on maths. So if you could beat that, you could beat anything, I guess.
Yeah, and also most of these terms were unknown, so you don't know if these two terms, which one is larger. So you can't sanity check your numbers necessarily.
Yeah, right. And I also tried Googling it, because we also wanted the case. We always want this case to be Chat GPT immune, in a sense, or Chat GPT proof, and we also want it to be a little bit Google proof as well. Ultimately, we don't discourage the use of things like that, because it's a difficult thing to do. I mean, I've told people before, if you feel it can help, go for it. But in this case, I think you would have still fallen for that. I remember Googling a barrel to a gallon or something like that, and I got an answer of between 58 and 64, and I was like, no, that's not going to work for me. So yeah, interesting. But yeah, let's get into the case. I might just bring up the case that I used for testing, and we also have Dim's version. I think Dim, what's always evident to me, when I look at Dim's videos, is the fact that he thinks while he talks, and he works quite fast. So if you're not used to his content, you have to, like, almost, if you want to learn a lot from it and you want to do it with him, you almost want to watch the video a couple of times, and you want to watch it in like super slow-mo, because he's working so quickly. But that's the point of these videos, is to hopefully look at it a little bit slower, and hopefully unpack it so that there's learnings from it. The idea behind these videos are also that we try to sorry, just trying to sort out my windows here, but we try to actually share tips and tricks and best practices from our experience. And yeah, the nice thing about this case is, what we wanted to achieve was to make it as simple as possible. So I think it was simple to understand the basic principles. Essentially, you didn't have much from an instructions perspective. You basically need to convert stuff. And we'll get to the bonus questions, but I see I still have a not applicable error on my level 4 that I was trying to debug, but then ran out of time. But yeah, essentially, if we look at level 1, it was considered very easy. I think something that a lot of the participants missed out on was the fact that they had to round to 2 decimals. So we were a bit lenient this time around, and we actually gave participants the points when they didn't round down, but there were quite a couple of participants that didn't round not round down, but they didn't round to 2 decimals. So essentially you have level 1, easy, convert from pennies to pounds. I think something that also confused Dim was the fact that penny and pence is not the same thing. I know that he said when he grew up as a child, those two were actually used interchangeably. But if you looked at the conversion table, this is now my converted conversion table. But when you look at the conversion table, a penny, 12 pence actually goes into 5 pennies. And I know that also made Dim scratch his head a little bit, because you have the measuring unit and the measure quantum, the equivalent unit and the equivalent quantum. So essentially it was 12/5 pence to pennies. So but Joe, let's maybe talk about the data side of things, the conversion table. Steyn, Jason, what did you guys do? What was your effective way of actually converting this? Because I think that's the biggest thing that Dim struggled with, and that's the biggest point of head scratching that went on. And if you got this right, and if you could do this quickly, you could actually get this case out in half an hour. And that's what Dim showed us. He was able to do in around about 26 or 28 minutes. But it was all about getting this part quickly and accurately out, essentially.
Well, I think what most of us did is convert the data into a single measure, not try and use with the table as is, but try and get the value for the units in a single measure.
Agreed. So I went to pennies. I know that, Steyn, you said you went to pounds, and I think, Jason, you also went to pennies, right?
I went to pennies as well. Yeah, no specific reason. I think, I mean, when we were sort of chatting briefly, we mentioned that it just gives you a slightly higher order of magnitude when you're looking at the numbers. So,
yeah.
But yeah, just I think the key was to take one base so that you could do lookups against a single base unit. And I think that this concept is what ended up being far more challenging than you sort of think it should be at first glance. And I think we all struggled with how do you elegantly build some formula or set of formulas to convert from a given point in the table to some base. And I think particularly what made this more challenging was, you can see sort of in the upper half of the table on the screen, it doesn't sort of flow linear. It's not a direct linkage the whole way through. You don't go from pence to farthing, and then farthing to halfpenny, and then halfpenny to tuppence, and then tuppence to groat. It's a bit of a mix and match, and then sometimes you get to shilling, and then you kind of have to get back from shilling back to some other base and then go around. So that actually made it quite tricky. And I think upon reflection, it's always, hindsight is 2020, right? So it's easy to think about this in after you've done it. But in this context, I think actually just doing the thing manually, if you just decided to just do it manually, and I mean, it's only 12 rows, you just type them in and do the maths like literally by hand, to get those base measures in. You would have probably done it in 5 minutes, I suppose, and then it would have been time well spent. Whereas on any other day, on any other case, you probably don't have a very scalable solution then if you've done it manually. But in this case, that was probably the right way to go.
Yeah, agreed. And Googling didn't help. Googling. So what helped for Googling is just to maybe check your calculations. So if you got to maybe penny to tuppence, or we think, I mean, crown to shilling, but then I want to get to penny, so I have to get from shilling to penny, and then so basically there's 2 levels of conversion there. So if I wanted to just check that I'm multiplied or divided correctly, I could just go and Google penny to halfpenny, and then get a number or get a measure and just check myself. But like you said, I mean, time is of the essence. But I think for me, how I built this table was I did it manually. I literally made this a table as I usually do, because then it makes everything essentially named references, and I don't need to lock down the references. The nice thing about it is I can add to my table throughout, and it keeps on updating all the formula. So I don't have to go back and go change my row number reference to 22 or to 23. It automatically does that. But then this conversion table, I did it manually as well. Steyn, what did you do anything different?
Now, I also did mine manually. But I will say what's also interesting about this table is 2 of the currencies had a space in the name. So in your answers, if you just use a text split based on a space, then that you wouldn't have been able to do it with those currencies directly.
Yeah, we saw that in level 6. I also split. I also used the text split with space, and then British florin and half sovereign or half sovereign would have completely broken your formulas. But then I saw them also had an elegant way of handling that with a quick let and a couple of other tricks up his sleeve. But yeah, let's get back to the case. So essentially, once you've got that conversion, there was a way that you could just go and just do an XLOOKUP. So what I did was I used an XLOOKUP, and I brought back a full row of data where it actually matched the equivalent unit, and then I just did a rounded divide by, multiply by, rounded by 2. And that's essentially how I got question number 1 out. And I think a lot of people already fell flat at question number 1 because they took too much time on the conversion side. Maybe panic set in, you're working under pressure, you're making mistakes. That happens. And I think just to get over that, it's just practice. It's just practice and experience in the end. Any other thoughts around level 1, or can we move on to level 2?
Yeah, I just want to say on level 1 there was you only had one conversion, so you didn't have to use multiple conversion items. You could just look up this item, and then as you did, you do your calculations based on that single line.
Yeah. So you didn't have to actually expand on your conversion table for level 1, basically, right? Okay, so level 2, same story. We just want to convert the money to pounds. So now it gets to two or more levels of conversion, and essentially I did a very similar thing for level 2. I essentially brought back the whole row that is matching with an XLOOKUP, and I brought back the whole table. I called the table money. So I could just refer to the money in equivalent unit and bring back the whole table of money, or the whole row that is relevant, and then basically also did the same, multiply by, divide by, got it into pennies first, and then just divided by 100, rounded to 2 decimals to get it to pounds. That was pretty much my method. I don't know if you guys had a more elegant method around that.
Well, my units was in pounds, so I just had to look up the unit and the pound value for it.
Yeah, so you could actually skip a step there. Like Jason and I said, the reason why we didn't take it to pounds is if you actually got to this sort of level, it would have been 0.001, 0.0021. So it became very small multiples. But yeah, that helped you in that case. Because you're the case designer, you possibly said that makes a lot more sense for you on that. Happy with level 2. Any other thoughts or best practices?
Renier, I think maybe just something that's worth mentioning, just as a approach which looks like you and I sort of both followed fairly similarly, in fact, I think you can see it better in the way that you wrote your level 1 formula. But the ability to do an XLOOKUP where you combine 2 values as your lookup value, and then combine the 2 arrays as the lookup array inside the formula, is quite a neat trick to know. So you don't have to the point is you can join pieces of information in the lookup function, and you can join two columns from your lookup table into the lookup array. So you create a unique identifier in shilling penny, and then you go and look up in the two columns combined, which creates all the combinations. And I thought I'd just call that out because it's a nice thing to know that you can do that, and often, more sort of practical use case for that. If you've got a table of data that you need to look up and you don't have a unique identifier in the table, you can often create a unique identifier by just joining random bits of information. So like if you've got a first name and a surname, and you've got 7 Jasons in the group, if you combine first name and surname, then you typically will end up with more of a unique list. Sometimes you combine date of birth or something like that with it if you don't have a unique employee number. So I think that's quite a useful takeaway for me, is that you can do that. And it's good. That to me has got quite practical application, actually.
Yeah, true. I've used it myself in practice quite a lot. And the same goes for data science and data management, data engineering, to create a unique key in data by combining multiple fields to create a unique value for specific specific units in this case. So as Jason said, essentially I just combined the measure unit and the equivalent unit and compared that with a combined measure unit and equivalent unit, so that XLOOKUP could actually return that relative value or the relevant value. So thanks for calling that out. I actually forgot about that part. And then the other thing that I did, and I guess this is not something that I like about Excel, and I think it's something that they should actually fix, is how to lock down your actual column references. So in this case, if I wanted to pull the formula to the left and to the right, because it's in a double square bracket, it won't actually adjust. But if it was in a single square bracket, if I was just referring to a field and I pulled the formula to the left or the right, it would actually move the formula. It would move the table reference as well. So that's just something to note. But working under pressure, you won't necessarily remember that notation either. So that's one of the drawbacks from using tables is the fact that locking down table references is not as simple as pressing F4 as you have with cell references or array references or range references in that case. Okay, level 3. If you guys are happy to move on to level 3. Level 3 was essentially the same as level 2, with the added difficulty of having to split up the amount and the actual currency value. Same conversion, same rounding. So essentially same level of difficulty except for that split. And I think the difficulty here, and I think Tim said that's just annoying. I think that was the quote. He's just like, that was just annoying, the fact that British law and you couldn't just split on space. So I guess the big thing for me was I just used text before in that case instead of text split by space, so that you don't have to go and put the half sovereign and the British florin back together. What I thought of later on is what we've seen in some techniques is people actually removing that space potentially, or changing the reference so that there's no spaces in the currencies, but then you have to remember to do it across all of the case. So that's another way to do it, but with the modern text functions, there's no need for this anymore. So essentially just doing a text before a space, and then I use that double dash or that double minus, double negative, to just convert that to a number, so that it's not just text, so that I can actually use it in calculation. And then I use the text after for space as well. And that basically split it up for me. After that, it was the same as level 3 or level 2. Any other thoughts from you guys?
Same approach from my side. Initially went text split, then broke, and then went text before, text after. Yeah.
That's exactly what I did. Same for you.
Yeah, now I forgot about the text before and text after. So I did like where I substitute the British florin to something else, and then I did this text split, and then I reversed the substitute by putting it back in the original order.
Now, Steyn loves a substitute. He he uses that quite a lot, and it's always in the most interesting ways. What you could have also done is potentially, if you're not used to the new text functions, you could have also done data text to columns. But your challenge there again is the space. If you're using spaces as the limiter, it will split it over 3 cells for the British florin and the half sovereign. Right, level 4. This is where things got real, and as you can see, I didn't get all of them out, and I know why, but I didn't have more time to spend in testing, and luckily we had them help us with testing as well. But I had to set up all of the testing platforms and communicate and all kinds of things. So there was just too much to do, and I essentially got a lot of points at least. So I didn't get no points, but maybe you guys can take it from here. I think if I just explain how this question is supposed to run is essentially, and I think level 4, we actually built out the explanation a bit more. This was still an older version before we had explained it in a lot better wording or verbiage, I guess. Essentially, again, for the total price, you had to split out the number and the currency. Same principle as in level 3, but in this case, you want to determine how many coins, or what is the least number of coins that you need or that you can use in combination or alone to make up exactly 516 groat. So in this case, you could have used, I think you could have used pennies. If I'm not mistaken, or maybe it was half penny. I think it's pennies, but you could have used 860 pennies to get to 516 groat. And essentially, what I initially just did was I also just split them out, and I used a text split by a comma space. What's interesting is, and what's notable is the fact that text split, you can feed more than just one character. So I typically use comma and space because I want to actually trim the space before the word half penny. So that's one nice tip, is that you can use multiple characters. And what's also cool about text split is you can actually use an array of characters, and we'll look at that in level 6. You can actually use an array of characters or sentences or words or the whole alphabet for that matter. So you can do quite a lot with this text split function. But that's how I initially prepared the information, and then I went into a different sheet, and I essentially went and I laid out everything for me in a logical way. Did a conversion into each value, and then essentially took the least number of the lowest value. And if it's not the lowest, essentially just a very high number, so that I can determine what the minimum is. But I think maybe you guys can share your screens and maybe share how you laid it out and how you structured this question to make it make more sense for you guys.
Steyn, do you want to go? Shall I?
Okay, I can go.
Cool.
Yeah, show us the magic, Steyn.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did the text before to split it out, and then I got the values. And then what I did is I got the value for each of the coins, and I also converted my original value into pounds to have a common value. And then I realized to get the minimum amount of coins, you'll need to use as much as the highest domination as possible. Now, the highest domination would be the least amount for 1 pound. So what I then basically did is I tried and figured out how much I took the minimum of that, and I multiplied it by the pounds to see, and then I trunked it to see how much coins can I get just to be just a bit lower than the price or equal to the price? And then for the smallest coin, I just made up the remainder of the value to get to the price of pounds.
Oh, that's a very nice and simple way to do it. I think what we need to mention there is the fact that you use the min function. Using min happens quite often in these kinds of cases as well. And then the trunk function is essentially just to remove any decimal. So it's not a it's essentially the same as round down essentially, but trunk is just a truncate. So it's just chopping off the decimals to get to a full number. Jason, did you have anything to add? How did your model look for that?
Yeah, very similar to Steyn. I'll pull it up quickly. Similar to Steyn. I didn't use the trunk function. I used the round down function. The trunk is a nice one to know because it's not something that pops into my head generally. But yeah, it's good to see how these different functions are used. I mean, much the same setup here. Looked up from my table the penny equivalent of the respective values for groat and penny and halfpenny, and then again had to use the in my case I had to use the maximum of the two. So the maximum value would mean I could use the least amount of coins. That's how my logic was set up. So the maximum value per coin would mean that I could use the least amount of coins to get there. And then I think the part that was nuanced, and it comes into Steyn's trunk function and my round down function over here, is that if you had any sort of decimal places, it means that you needed slightly more than the value of coins, and so that means you needed to go to the lower denomination coin and then calculate how many of those you needed. And so that was a bit of the trick, but much the same.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think it's worth noting how Dima did it as well. I think it's worth actually studying how he did it, and how he could quickly actually fix what he did when he realized that he also made that mistake that I made to just determine the one that has the highest contribution, because I think his model was actually simpler than ours, even simpler than ours. So he always amazes me with how quickly he's able to actually write out something big and difficult, in my opinion. But yeah, so that was level 4. Happy if we move on to level 5?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, level 5, that's where my not applicable errors comes in. So I realized I actually tried level 5 as well, but then decided that's where I run out of time and run out of patience to try and recalculate this. And I got some of the answers right, but essentially this was now getting into the conversion level 5 table. And let's look at that table. So I don't have a clean version of that table. I've got multiple versions of that table, but essentially you had liquids and you had dry goods and you had wine, spirit, cider, oil, honey, etc. Right. So the big thing that you had to know was that you had gallon for both dry goods and you had gallon for liquids, and gallons for wine, spirit, cider, vinegar, oil, and honey is the same gallon as for liquids. But you had very weird characters here. The nice thing about this table is the fact that the equivalent unit was all 1. So you didn't really technically need to do a multiply by, divide by to get to something. But you had to potentially do multiple versions of a calculation or a conversion. So if you wanted to get to I can't remember what it was initially, but you could get from peck to bushel, from bushel to quarter, from quarter to weigh, from weigh to last, and then children and sack was one of the bonus questions, and I guess we'll touch on the bonus questions. But It was a very easy giveaway bonus question because it was actually easy to spot the fact that it didn't convert to anything else. And the way that Dim did it was he just did a search. He searched for SAC and for children, and he couldn't find anything. And he was like, "That's weird." And then when we got to the bonus questions, it was an easy, 70 points or something like that a lot of people missed. But yeah, I guess what made this difficult is the fact that it wasn't a straight convert, and I think the same reasoning applies that you're supposed to try and get to something that is similar across everything, and in that case, the logical unit was gallon. So, I mean, maybe Steyn, you can show us your conversion table. What does your one look like? Is it pretty?
Yeah, but I also just want to mention the reason why it says the wine, spirits, cider, and vinegar is because there's also a different measurement that was used for ale and beer.
In the olden days, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean that's crazy. And if you Google barrel, I think barrel to gallon, if you Google that, it's like between 30 and 35 gallons per barrel. So it's not a hard measure. It wasn't a hard measure in the old days. So it wasn't a simple convert. But yeah, show us your stuff.
Yeah, so I just did manual calculations to get all the measures in gallons, which took a little bit of time. But once I was done with that, then it's just a measure of looking up the value and then just multiplying and dividing as applicable to get to the correct answer.
Yeah. It really was that simple. But again, it was just the setup of the table, and I think this table setup was actually more difficult for me than the previous table. Jason, maybe you can share.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, this level, what are we on? Level 5 is essentially level 2, just with a different table.
Yeah.
But getting the table in this case was more difficult. I think I agree with you. Yeah. So I mean, I'll show you how I sort of came up with my table. I did it slightly manually and then slightly formula driven, and it sort of ended up looking fairly cool when I was doing it. But I think maybe the point to, or the thing to point out here is, you've got 2 pints is a quart, and then 4 quarts is a gallon. So you're going from pint to quart to gallon when you're looking at liquids. But when you get into dry goods, you've got 2 gallons as a peck, and then 4 becks as a bushel, and then you go all the way down to sack and children, which you ended up not using. But then you got weigh and last. But so to get to gallon, you have to go the other direction. And then when you had the wine, spirits, cider, etc., you had a couple of gallon options, and so it wasn't that straightforward in which direction to go, and so manually ended up taking quite a bit of time. So what I sort of came up with is starting with like just a unique list of the unique list of all the possible units that I had. I guess sort of fairly nice use case of VStack here to stack the 2 columns onto one another.
And also something that Dim used as well. He also used the unique VStack, by the way.
Yeah. So VStack to get them into one long list, then do a unique on that list, and then I sorted it for the sake of being pedantic, I suppose. But you probably didn't need to sort it. And then this was sort of the manual part. I could either go forwards or backwards, right? And so if I filtered the 2 lists for the item, I suppose, to the right means I'm going backwards, and if I filter the list for the item to the left, I'm going forwards. So you see, I basically did it manually. So you can go directly from barrel to gallon. Barrel and gallon is a single direct relationship. but from bushel, you have to go from bushel to peck to gallon, bushel, peck, gallon. And so that was sort of 2 degrees of separation. And so I just sort of manually pasted that formula, which now refers to peck. It's difficult to see it that direction. When I'm going the other direction, it's easier to see. So pint to quart, and then quart to gallon. And then I just sort of manually stopped when I got to gallon. And so I did that for each one. I went in both directions, and I initially just sort of pasted like out like this, and then where it sort of breaks, then I just went and manually deleted the stuff. But essentially, I stopped at gallon, gallon, gallon. Second, children threw me off initially. Gallon, 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 gallon. So basically, get gallon on like the end pictures, the end values, right? And that then gives me the line of flow from the value that I'm starting at to gallon, either forwards or backwards.
I would actually be curious what this would look like if you didn't sort it, because the list was actually provided to you in a more sorted way. I think it would have shown a nice progression in a pattern, in a sense. But
maybe.
But yeah, I was also.
If I take out the sort now, then I'm going to have to manually go and paste the thing.
No,
It's going to look terrible.
Please don't break it. Yeah. But I also thought about Power Query quite a lot during this case, because I know that there's a guy out there or a gal out there that would be able to quickly in Power Query just be like, because I know that in Power Query you can use the 2 list functions and things like that, and you could just join the table with itself and do a conversion and do a calculation on that conversion. So I actually think, and I'd like to actually challenge the guys out there, if there's someone in the comments that wants to show us how to do that quickly. I think that you could potentially in maybe 5 steps or less using Power Query actually do the whole table conversion with the recursiveness, because you need recursion here, right? Because that's the only way that you can get up to 5 degrees of separation with a formula. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a lambda out there as well that could potentially do calculations like these for you. And I'm sure that Dim has been thinking about that for the past week as well. And if Bo watches this video, he's probably gonna find a way to do it for us as well. But yeah, I like this visual, and I do this quite a lot. While I'm doing test cases and stuff, if I'm not working under pressure, I like building out something visually that logically shows me how to convert and how things actually tie to one another. And that's sometimes that is the key. Something like this is the key to actually figuring out the case, because you can visually see how to fix it, and then everything comes together. So I like this visual. Thanks for sharing.
So yeah, so I guess I've got this layout now, which is a bit unstructured, and so to help me get to my eventual conversion table, I just used a 2-row of the range as wide as I needed it to be, so stretching out as far left and as far right as I needed. And then the third argument on the 2-row is to ignore blanks, which is quite helpful. So it gave me a pretty clean range that started in one column and only went as far as it needed to go, which was helpful. And then doing the lookup from the direct relationships that I'd figured out here. So, gallon to peck was a 0.5, and then from peck to bushel was a 0.25. And then if you multiply that range together, then you get from gallon to bushel. And so then that helped me create the bushel gallon relationship. And so once I had this set up, then I could sort of go more formula driven, more scalable, to build up the base that went base gallon and what the ratio was. And then I pulled that back into my table, so that I had that lookup all in.
Yeah.
No, I'm lying. I didn't put it back in the table. I think I just used this. I used this table here the whole way through. And then that became my lookup table. And then again, now we're back into level 2, right? So now you've got the lookup table that's got a common base of gallon with the ratios that you needed. And then sort of very similar, Renier, to what we mentioned earlier, how you just joined your values. I joined them with like a slash sign, which I suppose was unnecessary, but just felt intuitive to me to say, like, this is that per that, just the way that I was thinking about it. But once you had that lookup, then it was just a straight lookup table, right? So it was level 2 again. And then very much the same as Steyn. So you pull up the value and then you multiply by the quantity.
Jason, I think that slash helps if for any reason in the future you need to split the values again. Whereas if you don't have the slash, then it becomes more difficult to split for any reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point. I like that, and just a mention of the product function there. So just we use the product function. I don't see that used often in the wild. It's something that I don't use a lot. And I mean, before competitive esports in Excel, I didn't even use the Sum product. But now that I know the Sum product so well, I use it quite a lot. Even in my daily work, so just a little shout out there to the product function.
Yeah. Shall I just carry on to level 6?
Yeah, please go. Yeah. This is where I ran out of time and patience, like I said.
Yeah, maybe on that note, it's worth mentioning, I suppose, that I don't think any of us did any of this in 30 minutes, right?
No,
I think so.
Except for them.
Except for Dim. I mean, obviously Dim did it, but I guess for those who are competing in the SAEC, who got to level 2 or 3 or whatever, you're on par with the rest of us. Don't worry.
Anyway. And I think it's important to just say that people shouldn't feel discouraged because of this case. Yeah. Ultimately, what I like from this and why I took this further into making a local competition out of it, etc., and also founding the FMWC South African chapter, hosting the South African Excel Championships and everything, was the fact that I thought I was an Excel superstar, right? Before this competition, I felt like I am Sir Excel, right? And we all thought of that. We all thought that we are quite competent in Excel until you're faced with a problem that shows you that there are functions that I don't know, and I don't work as fast as I think I can, and I can actually work a lot more efficiently, and I've got so much to learn, and that made me excited. And if I think of how much I've learned over the past couple of years, just being involved in the FMWC competitions, it's immense, and it's a lot more than I would have learned on the job, because on the job you typically, yes, you get faced with problems, but you could actually get faced with very similar problems, and you become really good at a certain part of things. But what I like about this is the fact that it's a fun scenario. It's not boring, and it's hopefully people went, I've got so much to learn. I'm excited and I want more. I want more of this, and that's what I hope people felt after qualifying round 1. And like I said, qualifying round 2 should be simpler, but it's a completely different case. So I think some people will actually be able to get it out, get full marks in the 30 minutes. Some people will also hit the wall and struggle. But then if they realize the tricks and the tips and the best practices that we'll show them afterwards, they'll be astounded at the amount of learning that they do. And I think that to me is the point of this whole thing. And that's why I tell people, participate even if you don't do well, because if you don't do well this year, maybe you do well next year, the year thereafter you're in the finals, the year thereafter you're in the top 3. You don't know, but it's possible. So I just wanted to add that.
Shall I run through my attempt at level 6 quickly, and then Steyn, we hand over to you. Renier, I think you sort of preempted this, but the text split function on a range of inputs is a really cool thing to know about. And so if you looked at the scenario column of level 6 where you've got the text, you can see it's a pretty structured set of data actually, right? It says total of, and then you've got the value and the currency, and then you've got was sold at a price of, and then a value and a currency, and then you've got for, and then the quantity and the unit of stock. And so if you realize that, then you just take out, total of was sold at a price of for of stock, and then you can put the text split function, and you can feed the text split delimiter an array of text, and essentially it strips out all of the text and uses that to split out your values, which is like incredible. So then you end up with 2, 6, 4, and 8 tiers, 10 farthing, 4 pint, and then the same stuff that we've done before to split those out into text before, text after, to just split those out into their individual components.
And that was essentially the essence of level 6, except for the fact that it's now a conversion from and a conversion to. But that was the essence. If you could do that, then the next difficulty is just to know, okay, now I need to go from tiers to pint, and I need to work in farthing. Farthing I need to convert, and I think you had to go. I don't know if you had to go to a different value, but yeah, that is the only difficulty of level 6, essentially from there.
Yeah, 100%. Once you had those 6 values split out into 6 columns, then it was applying the logic of the levels 2 and level 5 essentially, because you've got the money lookup and the sort of liquids lookup, or the units lookup, going at the same time. So you've got pennies and gallons conversions happening at the same time, and then just converting all of that into whatever units and gallons and things, and then it just became a multiplication and division concept.
I think the only difficulty around that is knowing when to divide and when to multiply.
Yeah.
That's the only difficulty. Yeah.
And it's amazing, Steyn, you mentioned it earlier, like very few of us have any real context of what these these names are. And so, if you think about millions and billions, and you're saying, okay, how many meters in a kilometer, intuitively you're like, okay, well, if I'm talking about meters, I need a big number, and if I'm talking about kilometers, I need a small number. But when you read the units here, there's no intuition about whether it's going in the right direction or not, and that was quite challenging actually. But yeah, I mean, I think we've said it. From that point on, that was really the trick. From that point on, it was applying the 2 conversion tables in the same case, and then just getting the multiplication and division the same. And then one of the key points was that the price was price per some quantity of stock, which I got wrong initially, and Steyn pointed out to me when we were testing the case that you had to then divide by the number of, to get the number of units of that price that you were selling, you had to divide by the stock. So that there was a bit of maths involved there, but by and large, once you'd got that all split out, fairly sort of logical from there.
Steyn, did you want to add anything around level 5 or 6, or can we move on to the bonus questions?
Well, yes, how I did it is I basically just converted the 2 quantities to both the gallons, and then I was able to calculate how many batches there was, and then it was just a matter of multiplying it by the price per batch.
Okay, that's cool. Well, it's a different way just to make it simpler. I like that. And I mean, with that's also another principle is if you can take something that is complex or that seems complex and you can make it simple, it's a lot easier to debug and stuff. Like your model is a lot simpler to debug than the method that I try to follow. But yeah, let's maybe look at the bonus questions, and something that we all said about the bonus questions that was quite interesting is the fact that we thought a lot more people would have done the bonus questions, because the bonus questions, a lot of them you could have done without needing to do the levels, and they are high. They contribute to high marks. Again, as we said last year in the I think after the first round of the South African Excel Championships, was I think if you were able to do. I think if you were able to do 2 or 3 bonus questions, you potentially would have been in the top 20 or potentially in the top 10. And just to make that sink in a little bit. So if I quickly share my screen around the bonus questions, the first question, again, it was just a conversion, and it was basically assuming exchange rate of ZAR, and the ZAR exchange rate was 22 rand 50 to the British pound. How much ZAR would you need in exchange for 50 shillings? So essentially there, I just went and said, I want 50 shillings, how many pennies to a pound, and then pound to ZAR. So that's essentially how I quickly just calculated that. The interesting thing is that some people actually went and this answer wasn't formatted correctly. It should have actually been formatted with a decimal point as well, something we had missed. But we gave the marks whether someone had answered 56 or 56.25. So just for the participants out there, we accepted both as the right answer because the actual answer displayed as 56, but the answer was 56.25. And then the second question you could have solved as soon as you solved level 3. And a lot of people got to level 3 but didn't do bonus 2. So that's just something that we have to talk about, is the fact that you could actually have answered this after level 3, and that would have just been the min of the answers in level 3. We spoke about this one conversion combination in the level 5 table that didn't connect to gallon. And again, had you worked with the conversion tables, it would have been obvious because you would have picked it up as you worked through it. But if you hadn't worked through it, you could have just visually seen it. I don't have the simple conversion table here, but you could have visually seen which ones didn't have matches, or you could have just done a Control F to just get the 2 ones that are unique in that case. Level 4, the level 4 growth answer, you would have had to solve level 4 to get to the answer of growth. And I think that was a simple calculation, but it was also based on, it would have been simple depending on how you calculated or how you actually built your model. If your model didn't involve if you couldn't determine which currency you used for every answer, because the answer in level 4 was a pure number. If you couldn't determine which one you actually used to answer or to get to the answer, it could have actually taken you longer than it would have. And that's where it's quite helpful if you maybe have a quick read through the bonus questions before actually attempting the case. And I know that we are tempted to run through the answers or run through the questions, but had you built I think for me, for level 4, there we go. For level 4, I actually built a data table, and I put the actual value of the highest contributing currency in my data table so that I could just do a unique of all of those currencies, and then I could just do a sum if of those currencies to get to how many of each I used, and then I could visually just see I used growth as the highest one. So that's just a tip. If you're building a model out there, this extra step would have taken you maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes extra, but could have given you 60 more points. So just a tip. Yeah.
Just a question. If you interpret that question as what coin did you have most as an option to use it to pay, so like as an available option of the combination, then you also got growth, because that one appears 8 times in the questions.
Okay, interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Funny,
it was
funny enough, I interpreted it the same way that Steyn did, and you get the same answer. But you and Diarmuid interpreted it the same way. So
Yeah.
actually, funny enough, I think you could have done it even quicker if you just interpreted it in a different direction.
because then you could have just done it visually as well. You could have
Count
you could
if
have
yes.
just done a count if across this
Exactly.
across this split.
I guess
I
you got
didn't
lucky.
I didn't even think about that. Well done. Well, it was perfectly designed. Well done, Steyn. Well planned. And then the final question is basically just the same as level. It was pretty much the same as level 5, level 6. I think that the challenge here is just that you had to go from a gallon to a gallon of dry goods that costs 1,000 farthing. Now you have to get from farthing to pounds, and you also have to go from a gallon of dry goods to a weigh. So it's a double conversion, and in that case, the only difficulty there is knowing when to multiply and when to divide. But essentially, the same logic applies as it applied to the other levels. Yeah, I mean that's it from us. I don't know if you guys have anything else.
Just a point to mention from just from like an exam technique perspective, the big difference between level 6 and bonus 5 was that level 6, it's worth spending time to come up with a formula that you can drag down, right? But in bonus 5, there's no value for coming up with a scalable function, right?
Yeah.
So actually, bonus 5 to do manually was actually relatively simple. And there's no value in not doing it manually, right? So in the bonuses, because they are so distinct from one another and they don't sort of build up from one another, and you don't need to copy it down across 20 questions to get the answers out and that hash total. For the bonuses, sometimes it makes sense to just hack away the numbers and just calculate it manually. And I mean, sort of in hindsight, that was 70 points, which was, compared to some of the scores that we saw, a huge chunk of points. And you could probably have done that manually, even on a piece of paper, if you wanted to, in 2 or 3 minutes. So I guess, in the moment, it's difficult to know whether you should be focusing on bonuses or focusing on the questions. And, it's easier to say that you should read through all the questions when you start and figure out which way you're going to go. It never happens on the day. You just get stuck in. But this was an example of where there was sort of pretty easy points lurking in the bonus questions, I think, if people had realized that.
Yeah, look, if you only got that 70 points, you would have ranked 21st on the rankings. So then if you just got level 1 out over and above that 70 points, you would have ranked top 20, so you would have been around 13th or 14th place. And if you got another bonus question, you'd have potentially been in the top 10, just to put things into perspective. But it's difficult, like you said, Jason. It's easy to say you should read, but we don't always, especially when under time pressure. And with that, that only comes with experience. To know, when do I jump into a bonus question? Do I have enough time to take on another level? That comes with experience, and it is definitely exam technique. Sorry, Steyn, I interrupted you there.
Yes. I just want to mention it's sometimes help to read all the questions before starting, because it does happen from time to time where a higher level question is actually easier than a lower question. So if you're
Correct.
getting stuck at the lower level question, then you missed the higher level question because you assumed it would be harder.
Very true. And don't read too much into the difficulty levels either, because I've also in the past read a question is hard, and then I thought it was hard, but when I did it later on, it wasn't that difficult, and I would have been able to get it out, but I got stuck on the fact that it said it was hard. So so that's a good tip. There was something else I was thinking of now, but now it escaped me. But let's talk about next week, right? So we are working really hard to get the next case out, and the next case is going to be a very interesting case, big passion project of mine. So I hope that all the participants will enjoy it, and I think it's going to be a very enjoyable case. I was thinking this afternoon that the case is actually very, it can actually be scaled in real life, and can actually be very helpful for someone in that industry. But yeah, we'll talk about that case next week when we unpack it. I'm actually going away, and I might actually be doing it from elsewhere, the recording next week. But yeah, the case will be I think it will be a lot simpler to get to level 3 at least. I think most people should be able to get to level 3, and then like I said, I think quite a lot of people would be able to do well, and I want to just tell the participants that they should try their level best to do very well in this case, because you can actually qualify just on your second qualifying round performance. If your first round wasn't great, you can still qualify for the finals. So give it your all, and don't be demotivated by the first case. Hopefully you've learned something from the first case. I think we've shared a lot of gems and a lot of tips and tricks. So hopefully that will also help you in the next case and in the finals as well. The finals will be held end of August in person in Sandton, and that's a lot of fun. And then the finals cases are also still in development, but the final cases you'll actually have 3 chances to get a good average score. So it's not going to be a straight knockout round like last year. You'll actually have 3 attempts at getting a good score, and the 4 highest averages will actually walk away with the prize money. Any closing thoughts from you, Steyn?
Nothing from my side.
Jason, from your side?
Just good luck for the next round to everyone. Hoping to see some good scores, and if nothing else, lots of learning.
Yeah, great. And another thing to just note is all participants get their hands on all the cases, all the answers, and can actually watch the debrief videos as well. So, like you said, a lot of learning coming out from it as well. So, if you've spent $500 to buy the ticket, I think you wouldn't be able to get as much advanced Excel skills and tips and tricks and learnings for $500 elsewhere. It's definitely money well spent in my opinion. So yeah, but yeah, thanks, gents, for spending time with me till so late on a Friday evening. I really appreciate it, and hope you guys have a nice evening. And thanks to all the participants for listening in. And we'll see you in the next one.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.